Celtics Reddit podcast.
Marcus Smart is so good. Tatum, Brown, got it.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. My name is Ben Vallis, aka Brutal Gash. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. We've got a new guest on the show today, Celtics Reddit power user and fellow Aussie, Aiden Rose. Aiden, welcome, sir. How's it going?
Good, man. Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's a long time coming. So,
yeah, absolutely. And for those listening, Aiden and I actually met. It was just inside the arena. Team USA versus, I think it was Canada, right? A couple of years ago. Seems like forever ago. Where we got to watch Tatum and Brown and those guys throw down. So this is like the next time I'm really talking to you since then. So feels like ages ago.
Yeah, man, I do. I think it was just inside the doors, maybe like just before the game. A good year and a half ago, maybe just under a year and a half ago. But a lot's changed since then in the context of the NBA, basketball in general, and of course the Celtics. So it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're finally on the podcast. So like you said, long time coming. So the Celtics, they get a much-needed win today, 120-111 against the Hornets after some shameful losses against the Hornets and OKC Thunder earlier in the week. Aiden, it's been a roller coaster of a season. Today we see a bit of an upswing, I suppose, with a fairly decisive win. What impact on your, I guess, overall expectations of the team did this particular game have, if anything?
Look, in my opinion, this game, it's an important win, especially, not just for the standings, but due to the head-to-head and the tiebreaker that we obviously need to get over Charlotte, as we are quite close to Charlotte in the standings. So I think we were 1-1 with them in the season, obviously the loss coming a few days prior. So I think that was pivotal, but not only that, just to gain some confidence back, as we have been on a bit of a rough skid. I think we'd lost 3 of the last 4. A lot of them very easy wins at surface, as it seems, but obviously, it's been a rough stretch after a really nice stretch for the team. So I think in the context of the expectation moving forward, a lot hasn't changed into where I think the team is from today, if that makes sense. We were missing a few guys in a few of the previous games, and I think if anything has become more clear, it's that when Jason is good and when Jalen is good, we are good, and we're probably almost as good as anyone in the league when those guys are on and everything's firing right on all cylinders. But it was good to get a win. I think we have another two games at home before we have another road game. So it was good to see. They played really hard. Even just from the eye test of the last few days. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's clear definitely at this point that when they play together, when they play hard, like they can essentially beat anybody. And really just the question at this point is like, will they play hard and when will they do that? And can they do that consistently, certainly to close out the season and to get a decent seed at this point going into the playoffs, but also to have any success in the postseason at all. You mentioned right at the top there, Tatum and Brown. Jaylen Brown, 38 points. Jason Tatum, 35 points, are the first pair of Celtics teammates to each record 35 points in a game since Paul Pierce and Wally Szczerbiak. Sorry, I had to pause for the pronunciation of that game.
Wally
Szczerbiak in November of 2006. So it's been a long time. But yeah, I mean, if those guys are on, our 2 All-Stars, and they're playing well, then it almost doesn't matter who you put around them. They're going to succeed. But it certainly helps if you put one particular guy around them. I wanted to start off the podcast talking about Aaron Nesmith, which I never thought we'd do, leading off a pod with talking about Nesmith, but he had an insanely good game. There's a post to the sub by Reddit user Sneaky Greens, who posted Aaron Nesmith in his, quote, breakout game, 31 minutes, 15 points, 9 boards, 3 blocks, 3 steals. What do you make of this Nesmith performance today?
Well, it's been really intriguing for Nesmith because in the first however many months of the season, or you could say the first half of the season, he didn't really get much playing time at all. And then over the last however many weeks or last month and a bit, injuries, guys have had to step up. He's like slowly been making his way, getting minutes, 10 minutes a game here, 15 minutes a game here. I thought today he looked awesome on the defensive end, 3 blocks. I think he had 3 blocks and 3 steals, which is unreal. He looks to be figuring it out a little bit more than than he looked to have previously. He's in the right spots on both ends of the floor. Most importantly, he's making his shots. Well, at least today, I think he made half his shots or close to half his shots. He had some good looks in the corner. I think he looked locked in. He looked more comfortable than he did previously, and I mean, hopefully for us, we got Pritchard, who's been awesome the last few days, been good all season really, but to see Nesmith come out and have a performance like he did today, as we said, breakout performance. If we could see more of that moving forward, I mean, that's going to be invaluable to the team, moving into the postseason. And I'm happy for him because he was a lottery pick, and coming in and not getting as much playing time, and then looking how he did today was really nice to see.
Yeah, and we all expected to love him for his shooting, and suddenly we love him for his almost Marcus Smart-like qualities, right? Like, he's coming in here, he's getting offensive rebounds, hustle plays, steals on both ends of the court, and just doing all the little things where I think we all, I'm not like a huge college ball fan, I don't know about you, but I didn't. All I saw was the highlights sort of after the draft and a little bit prior when it sort of was rumored that the Celtics were going to draft him. And I expected this finesse shooter coming off screens, coming off like Ray Allen, pin down screens, flaring off the wing and just popping these threes. And instead he's doing everything but that. And there was a Reddit user, Not Brendan, who posted in I think it was the post-game thread, Scal kept talking about how much the crowd loved Nesmith's energy and hustle and his big plays. Should help him gain lots of confidence. So perhaps it's like a coincidence or not a coincidence rather that the crowd is back and suddenly Nesmith is like elevating his game a little bit. So that was really good to see.
I think at Vanderbilt, he was like considered, quote unquote, the best shooter in the draft.
Yeah.
He was like a 50% three shooter, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong, which is like absolutely ballistic considering for the vast majority of college dudes, like they are like under in terms of their efficiency compared to the NBA guys. So it felt like exactly what you said. We were going to get a guy who was just going to be this knockdown three shooter. But the fact that we've seen so much more and he's brought other things to the table when we've needed him to, especially in today's game, is like a breath of fresh air. And I think, the crowd and Celtics, he kind of just brings, he looks like he has that Celtics like energy and that drive and that kind of hustle, the Marcus Smart comparison in regards to his game today, I think was really on point because he was just kind of in the right spot at the right time. And, those dives and running back and getting, I think he had a really nice intercept towards the end of the game, which was awesome. And I think, it's really good to see that from a guy like him, especially considering what was around his, draft profile coming out of college.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason Tatum after the game was quoted on Aaron Nesmith's energy. Quote, "It's incredible. Aaron's a guy who literally is going to give his body up on every possession and run through a wall. He plays as hard as he can for as long as he's out there and it doesn't go unnoticed." Yeah, I mean, the whole body on the line thing for Aaron Nesmith is definitely a factor. Like he definitely looks like someone who's going to throw himself into like a catastrophic injury at any moment. Yeah. It's kind of concerning. Yeah. But I guess like to wrap that one up, it's the whole point on that is it's admirable to see a guy like throwing himself in lieu of his normal shooting ability. Like he's doing everything he can because he's realized like, I haven't got the shooting touch yet in the NBA for whatever reason. I'm going to do literally anything else. And that's already endearing him to clearly the coaching staff. Like today he played over Grant Williams, who I think played 1 minute. We saw no Shemi, we saw no Romeo. And so the coaching staff in this game for whatever reason is prioritizing Nesmith minutes, which is really great to see. I'm trying to get sort of a better understanding, Aiden, of like why this game? Why did we look so good in this game compared to the OKC game and the prior Charlotte game? So what else from this particular game stood out to you?
One comment I want to make about the Charlotte game, the last Charlotte game, not the last one. I watched probably like almost every second of that game, and every time those dudes, like every time Charlotte would like just fire off a three, it was like going in. I mean, it was ridiculous. They couldn't miss. Terry was on. I mean, guys like Miles Bridges, PJ, like these guys couldn't miss. I got a similar vibe from Devontae Graham today, which kind of scared me at one point.
Yeah,
like
totally.
He just couldn't miss. And I think that guy's like probably like barely 6 foot without shoes on. So seeing guys like that, I mean, they pass the ball tremendously, which is really admirable considering that LaMelo and Gordon Hayward have been out for them. I think they're just a team that move the ball a lot, try and get the best looks that they can. I think today we just looked a little bit more locked in on both sides of the floor. I mean, you could see that right out the gate. And that's kind of like everyone, you know. Jaylen Brown looked awesome from the first quarter on both ends of the floor. We spoke about Nesmith, we spoke about everyone else. And I mean, it's weird because we have these games where guys don't look locked in, and we're, you know, everyone's critical and everyone's what's going on. Like we're losing to, you know, like Oklahoma City on a back-to-back. Like those guys have been blown out by Philly the night before. Just played Philly the
night before. It's insane to me that we lost to that team in those circumstances.
And I know this sounds crazy. I'm saying this. Lou Dort didn't play the Philly game, and I know Lou's a beast, but I mean, when you think about it, that was almost like a surefire win. Those guys had lost 14 in a row. And, you know, after those games, we're thinking, well, where is this team at? And then we look at a game like this and we see the guys just look locked in. I mean, the Jays today looked unstoppable. And one thing that I always love to see from those guys, especially Jason, because it's been something that previously I think he hasn't done as much. But when Jason drives to the line and creates contact, he can get those calls, you know. I think he used to shoot about 4 free throws a game. I think he shot about 8 today, maybe 8 to 10. And when he's getting to the line like other, you know, stars in this league do, making those drives, you know, doing what he can to create that contact, he's so much more efficient on the offensive end. And in my opinion, like he's almost this unstoppable player. He's really unique in terms of his frame, the way he moves, the way he can shoot, how quick he is, how agile he is. And I think when those guys use that, you know, and push to the rim, and in the Oklahoma City Thunder game, I know Jason didn't play that game, but the guys didn't really do that. I don't know if you kind of got the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of contested threes, and OKC have guys that play really hard. I mean, you know, Baisley played well, Pokashevsky, like these guys are good players, but I mean, in the context of where we are and what we're trying to do, you know, that should have been an easy win. I feel like the guys should be moving the ball more, cutting to the rim more, and trying to get the ball inside. Seemed like we did that a little bit more against the Hornets, and I think when our guys do that, especially the Jays, we perform much better on the offensive end.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, who is on this podcast regularly, he's our New Zealand correspondent. He has this concept of earned threes and earned buckets, and like, you know, you've got to earn your buckets, and the basketball gods will deliver them if you do enough to sort of adequately earn them. And I mean, today against the Hornets, the ball was zipping around. They kept the turnovers down, relatively speaking, only 14 turnovers. It's still kind of high in terms of league average, but at this point for this Celtics team, keeping it below 20, I think is a win. And just moving the ball around, kind of like OKC were doing against us the other night, and earning their threes. You know, the ball was going down tonight for the Celtics because the ball was moving around and they were looking for the right shot and, you know, making the extra pass. And even Tremont Waters, who got the start, you know, found Aaron Nesmith on a couple of really nice plays there, and it just felt like the buckets were earned, and therefore they went in, and therefore the game was won. So kind of unfortunately, it's like flash in the pan, lightning in a bottle for this particular Celtics team. It seems like they just can't do that night after night. But, you know, 9 games left in the season. That's the sort of stuff they got to be sort of, you know, trying to button down between now and the postseason. Evan Fournier, I feel like we need to talk about, because sort of is supposed to be a major component of this team. He should be the 6th man. You could argue he's in the top 4 or 5. Came back from COVID, clearly struggling from you know, coming back from COVID and his recovery there. Brad Stevens was quoted after the game. He won't make this excuse, referring to Fournier, but he's dealing with some of the aspects of it. He's dealing with a little wind-wise. He's feeling foggy. He's frustrated by it for sure. And just that word foggy, that, you know, he's coming back from this disease that we still don't know a lot about, even though it's like all of the news that we read about every day. The idea of coming back and you're already winded, you're lacking conditioning because you've been off the court for 2 weeks, but also there's like a mental factor as well, where your mental clarity is diminished as well. I just can't imagine going through that. And, you know, we've seen Jason Tatum go through that as well. And I guess what we know from that, what we've learned, is that they do eventually come back. Do you have that confidence with Fournier as well? He sort of had some flashes there right before he went out with COVID. Do you expect that production from Fournier towards the end of this season and more importantly, going into the playoffs?
Yeah, with Fournier, I do. When he came in, he, like, the first few games he had with the Celtics, he obviously looked a bit out of place. His shooting was off. I think he, missed a bunch of threes, missed a lot of shots to start off. And Fournier was having a career year. I mean, I wasn't too engaged with this season. I haven't watched Orlando that much, apart from probably when they played the Celtics or their own TV games. But he was having a really good year. He was moving the ball. His playmaking. I went back, watched some highlights, and he's like career highs in a lot of stats. Points. He's been really efficient. Everything. So I think it was a really underrated move by the Celtics to go for a guy like that. And feel like he can be a plug and play kind of guy, a guy who can create his own shot. Probably score on most levels of the game. Get a bucket from anywhere on the floor. Good playmaking, and he gets to the line as well. And I think him coming in, having that rough start, and then kind of finding his way. I think he had a few 20-point games or something before he went down with COVID. But I mean, seeing how Jason came back and how he struggled for a while, seeing Drew Holiday had a pretty rough stretch. I was made very well aware of it, as I have Drew on my fantasy team. So I was seeing a lot of 2 for 9s and 3 for 13s for a few weeks. So I think in the grand scheme of things, Evan is going to be okay. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is, as you said, we have 9 games left. His role is obviously different than it was in Orlando this year. I think he was taking like 16 shots a game. I think, getting that same kind of, getting those same looks and getting that same kind of production will obviously be hard, due to the guys that we have on the team. But I think in terms of the COVID struggle, once we hit the playoffs, hopefully, I know it's only a few weeks away, but I really believe Evan can be, feeling more like himself and looking like he did right before he got this thing, because he was looking good for a few games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that we're calling him Evan, like just Evan already, like he's already on that first name basis, kind of like your Kobe or LeBron. That's good to see. That means it's being integrated and accepted by the fans. So that's great.
We can't Google that last name. He told us not to. So
that's right. It's being redacted. Timelord finally returns, and just in terms of the recipe for why the Celtics looked good in this game as opposed to the few games prior, the big man rotation of Timelord and Tristan Thompson, I think, is really, really spicy, and it's a really sort of dominant is the wrong word, but it's a really effective big man rotation, and that there's not really, like when Cornette comes in, he's got flashes, he can occasionally hit the three, and he'll occasionally defend the rim with some vigor, but for the most part, he kind of looks like, a giraffe on ice skates or whatever the expression is. Whereas this rotation of Thompson and Time Lord is just like solid consistently. And today they had 12 offensive boards between the two of them. And there's just not really ever a moment where you're like, oh, like shit, I wish we didn't have this big man on the floor. Like, they're always just solid. So, with Time Lord back, the Celtics record with Time Lord as a starter is really solid. And talking about reasons for confidence going into the playoffs and trying to steer our minds away from these recent bad losses, does that return of Time Lord again give you confidence in the team heading towards the postseason?
Yeah, I think so. I think Rob's shown, or Time Lord, Rob, he's shown tremendous improvement over the last few months. I think his defensive awareness has been the thing that I've seen the most improvement in. I remember the last few years, you'd see him on the floor and it would kind of just be, knowing where to be, being in the right spot, sometimes being a little overexcited on defensive plays, and he kind of gets beat by his guy, or he'd fall for pump fakes a lot. And those things, he's matured and his feel for the game has improved so much, and in terms of that front court depth and that center rotation, I think, as hard as it seemed at the time, and regardless of, the cap issues and all of that, trading Tice, he's been kind of like a what's the word? Like a diamond in the rough for us over the few years.
Yeah.
I think we look really solid. Both those guys, as in Tristan Thompson and Timelord, bring different things to the table. I think, obviously, playing two of them at one time really, did some things wrong for us in terms of spacing the floor. And I think now playing one of those bigs allows them to go to work. Like, it allows Tristan to go to work down in the low post and get the looks that he's kind of been used to his whole career, if that makes sense. You know, and Daniel's not as much of a spot-up shooter in the corner because that's not who he is. I think the roles have become a lot more defined. Tristan is a center who's capable of playing 20, 25 minutes a game if need be, because I know we still aren't entirely sure of, Time Lord's minutes. As far as I'm aware, he's not a guy who you can just put him out for 40 minutes a game in a playoff game or 35 minutes a game yet. So I think, having those two guys, it's exactly like what you said. Tristan, ironically, it's like the day after the trade deadline looked so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, so much better on both ends of the floor. He's brought a lot in terms of the offensive rebounding, because over the last few years, we've been a team who kind of hasn't had that identity, if that makes sense. And that's a breath of fresh air to have a guy like him, a vet like him with that kind of experience. And they both bring different things to the floor. They both, kind of play similar minutes per game. And I think, it's made the front court a lot more clearer. Their roles a lot more defined ever since the trade deadline. And I'm definitely confident going in with those guys, man. I mean, Rob is a unique hybrid of a player, isn't he? I mean, you look at these stat lines, without even watching him play, you'll see like 12 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 blocks and 3 steals. And you're like, who is this guy?
Absolutely. Well, you talked about your fantasy team earlier. I was lucky enough to pick up Rob Williams off the waiver wires, and I'm very happy with it. I'm in a dynasty league as well, so I plan to hold on to him for many years to come. But today he played just under 17 minutes and finished a +8. It was pretty impactful on the court. A couple of turnovers, which is to be expected. A little bit rusty after coming back after a little while off, but his usual stats: 2 steals, 2 blocks, 9 boards in his short time on the court, and just his passing as well. You mentioned that maturity, Aiden, but really his passing game is coming along, and he does look like he might be able to fulfill that that Al Horford-ish high post dribble handoff, but also like play initiator out of the high post big man. And in staying out of the low paint and in that high post, he kind of keeps the paint open for our wings like Tatum and Brown. So really is looking like he's going to fit in well long term with the Celtics offense. But of course, he comes back one game, we win that game fairly decisively. Couple of hairy moments in the third quarter and the fourth quarter with the Hornets cutting it to 3 or 5 points there. But for the most part, things were looking good. We should move on to Marcus Smart, who did not play in this game. Suspended for quote-unquote threatening language towards a referee, and there's a Reddit user, Agent 00 Leprechaun, who just made a post, threatening language, ? And I've got the post right here. They go on to say, anyone know what Marcus said? Very curious how bad it was to qualify for a 1-game suspension. Now, Aiden, I didn't get to watch a lot of the OKC game, just due to work and family stuff. Did you see, was there a moment that stood out to you with Marcus Smart and the refs that you was clear that he was going to be suspended for?
Definitely not clear he was going to be suspended. I remember, I think it was late in the fourth, he got called for a foul that, looked like it was a bit of a brutal call, to be honest, and he was arguing. He had kind of like maybe a menacing look on his face towards the ref, but threatening seems like a stretch. I don't know what he said, but threatening, that's kind of a new one, isn't it? What could he have possibly said to where you'd convey that as threatening or threatening language? Or I'm quite curious myself. I don't know exactly what he said.
Yeah, what would be more threatening than whatever the average NBA player says in the heat of a moment when they disagree with the call? It must have been pretty fucking bad, right? It must have been a truly bad thing. I'm gonna see you in the tunnel or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but we didn't miss him today, thankfully, and to some degree, fans, at least fans on Celtics Reddit, maybe needed a night off for Marcus Smart because, with these games with Kemba missing and Tatum missing and Brown missing, Marcus Smart has been putting up more than, maybe his allowed quota of shots per game and missing a lot of them as well. So it was maybe just sort of a mutually beneficial night off for Marcus Smart and fans of the team. So I don't know. And the fact that we won the game as well, it's maybe a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Couple more things to run through here. Peyton Pritchard in his last 5 games. Got the stats here somewhere. Here they are. Peyton Pritchard, 24 minutes a game, 14 points on 46.8% shooting, only a couple of assists per game, less than 1 turnover per game, 3-point shooting, 4.38%, and 92.3% from the line. And I think if you factored out his game today where he shot 2 for 8, he'd be in that sort of 50, 40, 90 category. So Reddit user Jesus Christ 2020 wrote, no matter how rough this season has been, I'm so happy seeing our 2 rookies absolutely thriving in clutch time tonight. So obviously referring to Nesmith and Pritchard there. But Pritchard been absolutely awesome, and he seems to have broken through that rookie wall. Although multiple blood stoppages tonight for Pritchard, they had to stop the game twice to clean blood literally off his face. So not only is he absolutely balling statistically, but he's out there just putting his body on the line. Both of these guys are, and to be drafted by the Celtics and play a rookie year, for the Celtics and now in front of fans, and to be, putting your body on the line in Nesmith's case and drawing blood out of your face and out of your nose, getting back into the game, Steve Nash style with a bloody nose for the Celtics. It just seems like an appropriate characteristic for new members of this team. So very, very good to see. Just get into sort of the miscellaneous points of this game and the last few games for the Celtics there, Aiden. Is there anything else that sort of stood out to you recently?
Yeah, Pritchard, I think, or was it the Nets game? He had 20, he had 28 or something. He oozes confidence out there. He has unbelievable range from a guy who's been in the league. And if you go back and you see him shooting back at Oregon and what he was able to do there, he was taking shots from almost the same range. This guy oozes confidence. He has really tremendous skills, fundamentals for a rookie. I know he's, been in there 3-4 years at Oregon, and he might be a little older on the rookie side. What is he, 22, 23? Yeah. But I think for a guy, he kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe the Cam Johnson pick of this year, last draft, if that makes sense. Just a mature guy who has the fundamentals down pat, confidence, but over the last, few games, we might have lost a few of them, but to see him do well, kind of run the floor and be that, key spark off the bench for us. He's had some awesome games. I mean, he's an unreal shooter. He can get to the rim. I think he, for the most part, he's a good decision maker. That's been, one of my favorite things of the season as well, because he started off the season being a 50, 40, 90 guy, potential 50, 40, 90 guy over the first 20 games or so. Then I think he kind of, had that bit of a rookie dip. But over the last few weeks or for few games, even that, he oozes confidence. He's playing at a level, he's playing with a swagger that I think is quite unprecedented for a rookie, especially someone who's so far back in the rotation, if that makes sense. I mean, he's got no problem popping a 3, sometimes it looks almost 2 feet out from the arc, and just pure confidence. I mean, that's a breath of fresh air for the team as well. So that's kind of been a highlight for me over the rough stretch, we could say, the past few games, as seeing Peyton look just like a real professional. I think he's going to be a key rotation piece for us moving forward. And I know this might sound like I'm jumping the gun a bit, but I would not be entirely surprised at all if in the next 2 years that he ends up starting for us and kind of has a bit of a trajectory like Rob has, like the Timelord has had.
Yeah, he's certainly shown that in the last few games. Where are you at with, so he pulls the trigger from 3-4 paces behind the 3-point line. He has been doing that since he joined the team, but where are you at now with being okay with him, maybe let's say making that shot with 12 seconds left on the shot clock while Tatum and Brown are on the court. Are you like completely okay with that now, or are you still wishing that he sort of moved the ball?
That's a tough question, because when he misses it and we lose by 2, I'm going to tell you I'm not. But when he takes it and he makes it, I'm going to say this kid's an absolute, Yeah. He's a beast. But I think I don't think he's there yet. I feel like we should definitely prioritize Jason and Jalen if we're in a situation like that. But in terms of his maturity, and what he's shown on the court, and his decision making and his confidence, like, you can kind of tell some guys do not want that shot. They would really, some of them look like they don't even want to be on the floor, being in that position. I feel like he's someone mentally, he looks like he's ready for that moment. He's ready to take that shot, and he wouldn't second guess himself. And I will tell you this. I'd rather him take it over a few guys on the team, if that makes sense. Yeah. He's probably he's ahead of a few other guys that have been on the team for a few years. So he wouldn't be the worst guy to take it. But obviously, if I had to choose anyone, it would be run the ISO for Jason. But yeah. Yeah,
of course. But yeah, I mean, I love just the testicular fortitude of Pritchard. Like, today, he looked off Tatum. Tatum was wide open. The ball was zipping around the perimeter. Pritchard caught it at the top of the three-point arc, and Tatum was one pass away, wide open. And there was a defender closing out on Pritchard, and Pritchard just jacked the shot. And he missed it, but I respect that. He's a rookie. Yeah. Tatum is the man, and he was just like, fuck it, I'm just putting it up there. And I don't know, I think that kind of confidence for a guy who clearly has the ability in a year or two with some of that experience, he's kind of already got the maturity. I'm hopeful that if not the starting point guard for the Celtics, that he's, the first guy off the bench, because he certainly seems to have what it takes. Few other points to get to here. Reddit user Forzarine wrote, getting 0 minutes of Shammy and only 1 minute of Grant was like a balm to my soul. Romeo Langford was kind of like flavor of the month there, Aiden, when he came back from his many, many injuries. And like since then, he's had, in the last few games, he's had very few minutes. He didn't play at all tonight. Well, what's going on there?
Yeah, ironically, Romeo, even after all of that, does this dude even exist? He's still a little bit of a mystery on the court. Yeah. In terms of his playing time, it's strange, because some games he's playing, 15 minutes a game. He's one of the first guys off the bench. I think he looks good defensively. He's long. He has size. He can get to the spots at the right times and all of that. He kind of gets in the passing lanes a lot as well. I think offensively it's a bit of an issue. Like, he's had some stinkers where he's like 0 for 6 or 0 for 4 or 1 for 7 or something like that. If they leave him open, he takes it. But I think, that's where we are now. And I think coming towards the end of the season, rotations should be tightening up a little bit, even though we should be giving a lot of our guys rest. The playoffs is going to be really interesting when it comes to playing time for these guys, because you have guys like, Shimi Ojale, and you have Peyton Pritchard, and you have Fournier, and, even Grant Williams. I mean, Grant Williams was playing like 20 minutes a game off the bench last postseason. Yeah. Which is why when people say to us like, oh, the Celtics had these guys, I'm like, what do you know about Brad Wanamaker playing 26 minutes a game against like the best or second best defense in the league? Like, yeah. we really stretched it out last year. And I think that's what was so good about having Fournier. But I think I sent you a message about this before. It's going to be really interesting seeing guys like Romeo, Semi. These guys all bring different things to the table, but I really do believe in the postseason, our rotation's probably going to be trimmed to 8 or 9 guys max.
Yeah, has to be.
Tristan's a lock. Evan, Baring, he really still looks off his game. Evan's a lock. These are 2 guys who seem like locks off the bench. I think Peyton has more than earned his minutes over the past few months. This season he's been solid. And then really it's kind of whatever it is from there, is Romeo going to get minutes in the postseason? Is that why they're not, giving him as many minutes now. It's a little bit like the whole Jabari Parker thing, which is also really interesting because that guy has been, I mean, he's been better than I've expected.
Yeah. Also didn't play tonight.
He didn't play tonight as well, which is really strange. Hey, it's almost like Brad knew, but I mean, I can't really say that. He did start Tremont Waters, so it's really hard to gauge, hey, you know?
Absolutely.
Brad's a guy who seems like he doesn't want to screw like the bench rotation up. So he'll throw like Carson in the starting lineups. I mean, I think we played the Clippers and we had a few guys out and he was like, Carson Edwards is starting. And I'm like, I haven't seen Carson Edwards on the floor all year.
Yeah.
So I think the rotations have just, been really strange. And I think I read something as well that said this was like, or it might have been the OKC game, like the 29th different rotation we've put out this year or something, the Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, far out, man. I know we have injuries, COVID, but it's just really inconsistent in terms of, who we have ready and who's kind of playing on the floor for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The rotation side of things is mind-boggling. And Brad, I don't want to say fortunately, but he's always sort of blessed us with that kind of weirdness from him and how he sort of manages rotations when we have players injured. But yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not a professional basketball coach, but the idea of like promoting your third, fourth string guard to the starting lineup rather than just like bumping everyone up one level, like bumping Pritchard up to the starting guard and Draymond up to the backup guard, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Obviously, it worked today, and Scal did make a point that the game would come easier to Draymond Waters playing with the starters as opposed to playing with all of the third stringers, and that definitely seemed to be the case today. And while his stats don't jump off the page, we're fortunate to have a Draymond Waters game where like he's not sticking out like a sore thumb. Like he was just fine. He was just average and adequate, and that's really all we needed from him given the company that he had on the court. So, but yeah, I agree with you. The rotations are very confusing, and I look forward to some consistency there heading into the postseason. And with Fournier healthy, with Kemba healthy, there should be a really nice tight-knit sort of 7 to 8 man rotation there that we can look forward to. Interesting stat on Kemba, talking about his health heading into the postseason. He's missed a few games recently because, beyond the knee issue, he's had, I think it was like the torso issue they're calling it, or the oblique issue. His field goal percentage on drives prior to the All-Star game, 41%. I just looked this up before the podcast because I was just doing searching for interesting stats to present on this podcast. So prior to the All-Star game, field goal percentage on drives, 41%. After the All-Star game, or since the All-Star game, 58% on drives, field goal percentage. Was a huge increase in success there on drives for Kemba Walker. So, you add that aspect that Kemba Walker is it's clearly demonstrating better health and better return to form. Maybe you incorporate the fact that Evan Fournier will eventually recover. Maybe he gets the same inhaler that Jason Tatum has been given. And we start to sort of round out that healthy top 7, top 8. Maybe there's some cause for optimism there heading into the playoffs. And that's a good, I think, point to stop and segue into our next point, Aiden, which is the path to the 4th seed for the Celtics. So I think it's time to sort of talk about, seeding wise, like if you, like me, I've just been away on holidays for the last week and you don't glance at the seeding for a week and you come back and you're sort of discombobulated and you have no idea what's going on. At this point, the Celtics are the 6th seed. Aiden, do you think the Celtics are going to finish the season out at the 6th seed, or do you feel confident they're going to jump up to 5 or maybe 4, or how do you feel about that?
Well, if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said the 4th seed, I'm super confident. And then on the same day, we lose to a really injured Charlotte team. The Hawks beat a full strength Bucks without Trey. I mean, then it's like, okay, like this isn't supposed to happen.
It's not happening, yeah.
So I still have confidence that we can jump up to the 4-5 seed. I think Bogdan Bogdanovic is, I don't know what his injury is. I think it was a hamstring injury maybe. Seems like there's been a ton of them. It might not be a hamstring injury, but I think he's out, or he didn't play today. I think they played, was it today or yesterday? I think it was today they played Detroit. So I think the Hawks dropping, I mean, a lot of their guys have been playing excellent as well. Clint Capella's been excellent. Bogdanovic has been a really nice spark for them since Trey's gone down. And they've obviously been playing well since Nate McMillan's taken over as head coach with the departure of Lloyd Pierce, which is a little frightening. But I think Atlanta can drop. We have a pretty easy schedule. We have the fourth or fifth easiest schedule. We only play a few more teams over 500. Fortunately, we play those teams. I think the only team we don't play at home that's over 500 out of the 3 of the 9 remaining or whatever it is are the Knicks, ironically, and that's the last game of the season. So we play Portland. Portland, I think, is the next game, or San Antonio is the next game. And then I think we play Portland, and then I think, it's the Minnesotas, and touchwood, that last game was a bit frightening for us as well. But we do have on paper an easier path to stringing some wins together, as opposed to some guys who were kind of duking it out with, like in Atlanta and like in Knicks. The Knicks play Utah, play the Clippers. I think they have a bunch of teams that are above 500. So it really is going to be a day by day thing. I personally feel like we can put something together over these last 9 games. I would not be surprised if we're the 5th seed by half a game. And being the 4th seed and being the 5th seed with these standings is a world of difference.
Yeah, totally.
It's whether you play what's most likely going to look like a fully healthy Bucks team with some fantastic players, because those guys have had their fair share of injuries and COVID. Drew was out, so I think they're going to be a tough team in the first round. Or you play a Knicks, who I also think will be tough, because I think, Thibs, a well-coached defense. Some of those guys have been having really underrated seasons. RJ Barrett's been playing fantastic. Julius Randle obviously having a breakout season. I think it's so important that we fall in that 4 to 5 spot. Obviously, 4 would be the most preferable. And if you ask me who I'd rather play in the second round out of Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, personally, that's a pretty easy answer. I'd rather the Sixers in the second round. Might be a little biased, but I mean, look, those guys have been doing so good with Doc this year. Joel Embiid's looking pretty much as unstoppable as anyone has looked over the past few years. And it would crush my soul to see that man, drop 45 on us and go to the line.
Finally beat us in the playoffs.
I mean, it would be a great story for them, but not for us, because we've kind of been their kryptonite,
Exactly.
over the last few years.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we somehow beat them again? That's kind of like, the season has been insanely depressing. Like, what a way to turn things around. The Celtics knock off the very promising MVP, wielding 76ers and make it into the conference finals, if that were to be the case. That's what I'm aiming for in my mind. That's what I think about when I go to sleep every night. We need to beat the Sixers again.
Well, for one, I'll tell you, I don't know, me, I'm super vocal in terms of a lot of those guys, not trying to make a rivalry or anything. I know we already have one with them, but those guys, we're the first seed, we're so much better in this. And it's kind of like that James Franco meme, first seed, first time, we've been the first seed and then been absolutely destroyed by LeBron in the conference finals. Being a top seed is really not that important in terms of guaranteeing your way to the finals, and as Celtics fans, we would understand that probably just as much as anyone, or the Raptors or anything. You get a rough matchup. The Bucks got a rough matchup in round 2. They were a 60-odd win team, so nothing is guaranteed, especially when it comes to the postseason. But what really kind of what I don't get is I see a lot of stuff on Reddit, even, speaking amongst friends, because I have a lot of friends that watch play ball. We're always talking. Everyone is saying how can anyone stop Embiid? And I'm like, well, is this guy did he not play basketball for the past 3 years? And every time he went to the playoffs, do you get what I'm saying?
He has
how
been
can we
stopped.
stop Embiid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or this guy, if I recall correctly, this guy's put up 36 a game and lost by 15 in the first round to us. Like, there's so much more is going to have to be firing for them. They're going to obviously need a healthy Ben Simmons. Tobias Harris has been, I'm not trying to throw shade, but he's been one of the worst playoff guys of a player of his caliber over the last few years. Those guys have a lot to prove. They have a lot to prove. Doc has a lot to prove because his last, close to decade, he's had a pretty shifty coaching resume over in LA as well. So they have a lot of guys who have a lot to prove. Maybe they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder and surprise everyone. But if you ask me, who I'd rather in the second round out of those three, upper echelon teams, it's definitely Philly because of what they've shown us previously. And I definitely do not think that... I'm not going to say Embiid is not a difference maker because that sounds crazy. But it's not like, we don't have Luke Cornett, Tristan Thompson, and Rob Williams because we have those guys instead of, say, I don't know, man. Someone else who could, a Miles Turner, we're going to lose the series. Like, no one can stop Embiid because, Embiid has, done his thing, and the Sixers as a whole previously haven't shown that they have what it takes. Me personally, I think to be a deep playoff team, you need two guys who can give you 20 plus every night, no matter what.
Sure.
You need two guys. That's my opinion. You need two guys who can give you 20 no matter what. Chris Middleton's been a bit iffy as well, but he's a guy with Giannis. Obviously, you have Bam and Jimmy. Brooklyn, they have three guys who can give you 30, and obviously the Celtics have a few guys who can give you 20 plus. Those guys, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, I know they're a lot better in terms of their bench this year. Their roles are more defined, but it's really interesting, It sounds crazy saying you want to play the 1 seed if you do make it to the second round. But with the way that Brooklyn's been looking, especially being, shorthanded, do not want those guys to get the first seed if you're in the, same end of the bracket.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And with how the season's gone, a loss to the Nets in the conference finals, you'd call that a successful season. If we walk away
Most
from
definitely.
it like that, that's completely fine. The Sixers in the second round, the fact that you can sag off Ben Simmons, and this is playoff teams who have played the Sixers have shown this time and time again since the beginning of Ben Simmons' career. You can sag off of him. He can't shoot. So when it comes to defending or with applying help defense to someone like Joel Embiid, the fact that you can kind of pull the defender away from Ben Simmons on the perimeter and drop that defender down to double team Joel Embiid, that's the sort of playoff scheming or the sort of defensive scheming that you only really see in the playoffs and not from regular season games. So yes, Embiid has had this sort of MVP season. I'm not discounting that. He's been fantastic. He's been Shaq-like with an outside shot for sure. But
Definitely.
The playoffs is a completely different beast. And Brad Stevens has shown that he has this incredible ability to scheme against players like Joel Embiid. These top tier, these high echelon players in the playoffs throughout his 7 or 8 year tenure with the Celtics so far. So if we get to the second round and we meet the Sixers there, I'd be cautiously optimistic, but the downside is that if we lose to them, it's more of a sort of catastrophic emotional disaster for Celtics fans than anything we've seen maybe ever in our lives. So we do potentially have that to deal with.
Salt in the wounds. I won't be able to show my face for a while if they beat us.
I'll cancel my internet if that happens. If you're listening though, and you're like me, and you kind of have no idea what the seeding situation is and what to expect between now and the end of the season. So just very quickly, the current playoff picture, the Nets, Sixers, Bucks, pretty firmly in the 1, 2, 3 spot. Those guys might shuffle a little bit, particularly the Nets and Sixers, but for the most part, for the Celtics, those spots are out of reach. The Knicks are the 4th seed. They've got a 35-28 record. The Hawks are 1 game behind in the 5th spot. They've got a 34-29 record. 1 game behind them, the Celtics, the 6th seed at 33-30, and the Heat they've got the 7th seed, but they're essentially tied with the Celtics, also at 33-30, and the Hornets are the 8th seed, 2 games behind that at 30-32. If the playoffs started today, we'd face the Bucks. They're the 3 seed, we're the 6 seed. That would not be good from a first round perspective, particularly as, like you said before, Aiden, we could potentially face the Knicks or the Hawks instead. of the Knicks' 9 remaining games, they play some tough teams, including the Nuggets, Suns, Clippers, Lakers, and us, the Celtics. If they lose to all of those strong teams and the Celtics, they'd finish with a 39-33 record. The Hawks have a pretty easy final 9 games. The only really strong teams they face are the Sixers and the Suns. But let's say they drop their one game to the Blazers as well, who are jockeying for playoff position. They'd finish 40-32. So the Celtics, like you said, Aiden, they have a pretty lax final 9 games. If they can keep their heads about it, they play the Spurs, Blazers, Magic, Bulls, the Heat twice, the Cavs, the Wolves, and the Knicks. All extremely winnable games. Optimistically, though, let's say they drop one of those games to the Heat and one other brain fart loss. So they go 7-2 in their last 9. They finish at 40-32, which is tied with that projected Hawks finishing record I mentioned a second ago. But the Hawks have the tiebreaker after pummeling the Celtics a couple of times through the regular season. So if those 3 scenarios were to play out, the Knicks and the Hawks and the Celtics, we'd finish with the 5th seed and play the Hawks in the first round, which is definitely not a bad matchup for a healthy Celtics team. We'd need to finish like 8-1 to realistically have a really good chance at taking the 4th spot at this point. And from what we've seen from the Celtics team, I don't know if they have the ability to have a consistent 8-1 sort of stretch, particularly at this point in the season while we're trying to get guys healthy for the playoffs, while we're trying to rest guys. It doesn't seem likely. So, you know, we sort of titled this segment the path to the 4th seed, but really I think for the Celtics it's more like path to the 5th seed and then have confidence that you can win some playoff games on the road against the Hawks in the postseason in the first round there. Does that seem sort of realistic to you, Aiden?
Yeah, the path to not playing Giannis and Drew Holiday in round 1 and Chris Middleton, which would be, honestly, I mean...
Or the Knicks even at this point.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite matchup in round 1 is Atlanta. I believe that Trey might not get the same calls. I mean, those guys... out of all of those guys, who's really had playoff experience? I mean, there's Clint Capella.
Yeah.
I don't think Nate McMillan has won a series as a head coach since forever. I mean, I know all of his Indiana days, they were first round losses. So I feel like the experience prevails there. They have some really dangerous players. I mean, they have some good players. If they're healthy, there's guys like DeAndre Hunter. Those guys are good defenders. He's having a great year as well. So it's not like there'd be some pushover team that I'd feel like we'd run through. But out of all of those matchups, I think Atlanta's the favorite. And I would not mind seeing 40 minutes a game of Marcus Smart on Trae Young, even though Trae has been phenomenal this year. And when he's played us, he's been extra phenomenal. You know, he's unbelievable, that guy. And they have some good players. You know, Clint Capella's playing really well. John Collins is playing well. And ever since that coaching change, Atlanta's playing well. But I think that would be the best matchup for us. And like I said, I really do feel like Trey might not get the same calls that he would get in the regular season. And that's like my feeling with the Sixers as well. Embiid, I feel like, might not get the same calls. And with the whole sagging off Ben Simmons and playing off guys, the game really slows down in the postseason. Becomes more of a half-court game. And I think that's definitely when you play a team like Philly, most teams would have an advantage that they might not have in the regular season.
For sure.
With the schemes and all of that and preparing for guys and adjusting, And I think Brad is a coach, like guys like Spo and all of that who have proven they can adjust throughout a series. I don't know if we've really seen that from a guy like Nate McMillan. Throughout his, Pacers days, they might not have been the most talented teams. And I know they were pretty banged up when we played them 2 years back in the first round. But Atlanta's definitely who I'd want. It'd be nice if we had home court, to be honest. I feel like it'd make it a bit easier. But yeah, if things go right, I mean, like I said before, if you asked me a week ago about being the 4th seed, I would have said, sure, like that's in our range. I mean, we were a game behind. We were the 4th seed a good week or two ago, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it was close. Yeah. It was close, but it was like, sure, we have a favorable schedule compared to some of the other guys in the East in our range. So it was like, sure. And then, I mean, we're losing to the Bulls without Zach LaVine. Where, I expected us to 100% drop one of the Brooklyn Phoenix games. It was a back-to-back. but I thought we'd lose to Phoenix and then beat, a short-handed Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
But I think these few games have been really important that we've lost. The Hornets loss, the OKC loss, the Bulls loss have kind of thrown us out, like you said, of realistically going for that 4th seed. And I mean, home court against New York, Atlanta, Miami even is a bit shaky, because I still am not fully convinced that those guys can't be a threat to anyone in the first round.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely not a team, no matter where you're seated in the East. Miami, I feel like it's not a team that you want to play in round 1. And it would be pretty ironic if the Bucks got them in round 1, which seems like it could be a possibility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for what it's worth, the Heat, they're worth mentioning, because if we drop below the Heat, then we drop into playoff tournament territory, which would be terrible just in terms of what our expectations were throughout the season. But for the Heat, they've got a double-double against the Celtics, like we mentioned, throughout the next 9 games. They also play the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Mavericks in their final 9. So one of the more difficult remaining 9-game stretches of the teams we've mentioned so far. But, Pat Riley, the mystique of Pat Riley, right, of Spo as a coach, the adjustments and just the overall success of that team over the last few years, like they can't be discounted. And there is, some likelihood that we do drop below them into that 7th spot and, get into the playoff tournament. But then potentially we're playing, the Nets or the Sixers in the first round, and maybe that's our path to playing the Sixers and knocking them out of the playoffs prematurely. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. But I think we've seen, like, just to wrap this up, we've seen everything this season, and the sort of roller coaster of emotions and expectations has been sort of, obviously very up and down, as roller coasters are. And I personally feel like I'm completely desensitized to whatever might happen. And I've never really said this before with regards to an NBA season, but a little bit I'm just looking forward, like, to it being over, right? And moving on and seeing guys like Tatum and Brown and, Nesmith and Fournier getting a full off season to get their win back, to rest, to practice and try and find some normalcy there heading into another full NBA season. Because, as much as we'd like to talk about us potentially knocking out the Sixers and having some sort of playoff success, it really doesn't seem like it's going to happen. It really just seems like we need that off season. So I'm kind of just looking forward to it being over in that sense. Does that resonate with you at all, Aiden?
Yeah, definitely. I do have 2019 vibes in a way, because we went on a stretch in 2019 as well where, like, I don't know if you remember, do you remember that long plane ride where everyone was were they playing cards and Kyrie and everyone, and then we won 4 in the West Coast? I was actually at a few of those games, but I remember I was in Vegas and we got blown out by Houston, and then they'd won like 4 or 5 on the road, like in California. Like, they played that whole stretch there.
Yeah, it was that Golden State game where Gordo scored like 30-something points and they all looked amazing again.
Yeah, and then he got the buzzer beater the next night in Sacramento, and then they beat they beat the Lakers. And then it was the same thing, what a lot of we like, a lot of the guys have been saying lately with this team. Like, we have that notch, 7-3 in the last 10, and then we go on and lose 3 out of 4 easy games. So, I do agree with you. It definitely hasn't come across like this team has the consistency that it did last year. And maybe it's all the uncertainty with injuries and COVID and it just being a weird season, no fans. So, next year, hopefully we can be a bit more optimistic in that, the Celtics would be a bit more healthier, a bit more consistent, guys developing. That's something I definitely do share that, same sentiment. But I do want to ask you, what is your prediction, rolling into the playoffs? Where do you think we'll seed? And who do you think will play round 1 if we go on to round 2, etc.?
Yeah, so 5th seed finish, I think. I think will be a second round exit, which I think, all things considered, I think that's fine. If we can somehow finish with a, non-playoff tournament seed, if we can somehow plan and scheme and play ourselves through a first round playoff series and sort of have a humble exit in the second round, I think that that would almost be exceeding expectations at this point. That's my prediction. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's what's going to happen. I feel like we I feel like we will get the favorable 4 or 5 seed first round. I feel like we will beat whoever's in front of us, whether it's Atlanta, whether it's New York. If it's Miami, that's a bit different. I'm not sure who I'd take in that series, but and then second round, I do feel like we will fall short. I'm not entirely convinced though that we can't pull something out of the hat against Philly. If it's Brooklyn, I mean those guys are a different story, but I'm kind of on the same same train as you with this.
Yeah, you mentioned 2019 before. I'm reminded of that now, and I feel like we're all like a little bit more hardened as fans. Where all of 2019, I was sort of preaching, "Oh, we're fine. We've got this. We've got a switch to flip in the playoffs. Like it's all going to be fine." And then I think we had Ryan Bernardoni, Danger Card, on the podcast, and he was like, "No, definitely not. We're gonna go out in the second round." And of course, we did. It's exactly what happened. And so I just can't like sort of elevate myself to that standpoint again. Like I've seen too much shit, So I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. I hope that you're right. I hope that we do surprise everyone, and particularly our opponents, and we do see some sort of deep playoff success. But Aiden Rose, we've been talking for an hour now. That's not bad for your first podcast, mate. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again for joining us.
No problem, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I had awesome fun, and hopefully our guys can, put something together and finish the season as strong as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see, and hopefully we'll have you back on at some point in the postseason to talk about it further. Folks, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all for joining us. We're looking forward to podcasting our way through these final 9 games and hopefully talking to Aiden again throughout that stretch. Until next time, go Celtics. Peace.